So without further ado, I'd like to invite my friend and colleague. His name is Quang Do. He's the founder of Overseas Vietnamese onto the stage with me. And we'll hear a little bit more about his story and OV. Hoang, welcome to Saigon.
Thanks so much for having me, Hao. Glad to be here.
Yes. How many of you know what the Overseas Vietnamese group on LinkedIn is? Maybe just a quick raise of hands here. Probably the majority, it sounds like. Quang, I could explain it, but why not it come from you actually, because you're the founder? Give us your elevator pitch. What is OV? What is Overseas Vietnamese?
As you all know, Overseas Vietnamese, we are one of the largest Asian diasporas globally due to a couple of historical factors. Myself, I'm German Vietnamese, and growing up, always had the urge or was very keen to connect with my fellow Vietnamese. So out of that spirit, I started this community in order for us to connect globally. This has always been the vision so far. So we are a global online community, started online on LinkedIn, mainly there, to connect us as professionals. But then now moving on, focusing more on creating opportunities to connect offline and in person. And yeah, overall mission to connect our people globally.
Cool. So for those of you guys that follow me on LinkedIn as well, I actually discovered OV through LinkedIn.
Yep.
This was 2, 3 years ago. And that's how Guang and I met. It was in the middle of the lockdown, and we were all looking for connections, but not just your general business connections. I think in Saigon, for those of you that go out there, it's quite easy to connect with people. It really is. But how to find people that are also like-minded and come from similar backgrounds or have challenges and opportunities at the same, that's where it gets a little bit harder. But I would say OV has been a great connector for me personally. I encourage you to join, by the way, the LinkedIn group. How many people are in the group now, Quang?
We're growing very fast. We just hit 20,000 members on the LinkedIn group. We have 10,000 followers on the page, and expanding into Facebook now. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, and what's the kind of makeup of that group? Like, who are they? Can anyone just join? Or is it a bit, are you trying to curate the community a little bit?
Yeah, so a bit of backstory there. When I started the LinkedIn group, I started to use LinkedIn myself more. So the initial 1,000 members would be usually people from very big name companies, Google, Facebook, McKinsey, all the big ones, where I just typed in the search field Nguyen and just invited all of them in. So we had like a very high caliber, like well-educated, white-collar kind of profile within the community, and over time it just organically went into any other field that you could think of, creative, entrepreneurial. And by now, I think we are very well distributed across the world and across industries and across trades. So a very healthy mix, I would say. And more Vietnamese, original Vietnamese also are joining. So it creates a lot of more synergies and a lot of opportunities for us to connect amongst Vietnamese overall, globally.
Guang, just 2, 3 years ago, I remember hearing the story of OV too, but you were an intern, right? 3 years ago, you were an intern at VC,
Yes.
is that right? And you started this group for yourself to connect with people that were working at cool companies, wanted new opportunities, and you were wondering, how can I get that opportunity, right? Because you came from, your family is a blue-collar background, refugees in Germany. As some of you might know, especially those of you that lived in the West, it's hard to network your way into a big, awesome corporate opportunity, let alone corporate startup opportunity even. Maybe you can share your motivation, like personally, for driving this, and what were some values you got out of it? Maybe you can share your story about getting your job at Google as well.
Yeah. So building on what you just said, I think every one of us been there searching for a job in corporate or at some company. If you apply through a job posting, it's almost most likely too late because you compete with so many people, right? And you're just one of many. So when I was looking for a job in VC, which is it's a much more exclusive community as well, and there are no like typical ways into VC. you will need to have a proactiveness to network yourself in, right, and to connect with the right people. So coming from an immigrant family, many German Vietnamese are from immigrant families. I had to find other creative ways in order to break into the industry, and was trying to establish my personal brand, but also to make the valuable connections there. But it's difficult to start from zero, right? If you only have your peers at university, you talk to them when you see their parents, their uncles have so many connections that are so valuable to them, and then you look into your own family. Most of my family is still in Vietnam, so how could they help me, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead. Maybe you can share about the whole Google part
Yes,
of the
yes.
story too.
We're about to get there. So yeah, I started out of that motivation. I started this community because my thinking there was, if there would be Vietnamese working at top companies or companies that I would want to enter, probably they would want to help me, right? Because if I imagine myself being senior in some big company and some overseas Vietnamese junior reach out to me, I would see myself in that person, right? And I would be super willing to help that person. But how can I create that link, and how can I reach those people, right? And LinkedIn is a platform where professionals mostly are on. I was looking for such an existing group myself. Didn't find one that was good, well structured, that was well managed. So just created one with a generic name, Overseas Vietnamese, and then loaded it with a lot of members. So a bit personal story on how I got my role. So for those who don't know, I work at Google in Singapore for the Vietnam team. And I applied during the midst of the pandemic. And it is a job that required three things that I didn't meet. One is Vietnamese proficiency. By now I speak Vietnamese. Back then it wasn't that good. 2 years of work experience, which I didn't bring either. And basically a Singapore visa or permanency that I can stay there. So a clear no. I think I wouldn't even go through the AI by applying in the system, right? But through the power of community of OV, the country head back then is American Vietnamese as well, and she believed in me, so she put me into the process, and I got the chance to interview, despite not being eligible officially to interview. So this is, I think, one of the best case example of how this community can really leverage and really bring you opportunities that you didn't have before. So encourage everyone to leverage and seek out opportunities proactively within OV. There's a lot of opportunity there.
Very cool. Yeah, I had a similar experience 7, 8 years ago when I was applying for jobs at Google. I met some of the criteria, not just Google, McKinsey and whatever. I got rejected by all of them. Didn't have a mentor, a digital mentor, or an advocate for me. Robert Walters, by the way, is a good advocate. You'll hear from Phuc in a little bit, the country manager, and also Vicky in the back there. Find them. They'll get you hooked up. But yeah, OV, that's such a great story. You went from not meeting any of that criteria at all, and suddenly you're plugged into this community, and people will just listen to your story, right? They kind of see you and see themselves in your own shoes. So awesome. How long has it been in Asia for you now? And of course, people are probably thinking, yeah, you work in Vietnam. Are you going to move here at some point? What's your take on it now that you're here?
Sure. So I've been in Singapore for 1 year now. We call it Googleversary at Google. It's been 1 year with Google, 1 year in Asia. And because I work for Google Vietnam and I have Vietnamese clients, I spend a lot of time in between Singapore and Vietnam. So you're going to see my face here a lot. And because I'm in the comfortable position of having the job security at Google, but also an employer who allows me to explore my own passions, I can further build my presence here. I can further come here, connect with people here. And once the right opportunity comes, I might make my move here. So this is clearly one of my ambitions that I'm working very concretely on. So might come here in the next 5 years.
Okay. Well, Phuc, you heard him. Go get him after this. Cuong, the 20,000 members, and I feel like this community that OV has created is actually much bigger than that somehow. Because whenever I look at, like for example, Calvin, are you out there? Calvin Lam, there you go. He's the oldest guy in the room. Oh, there's two Calvins. There's the food blogger, the YouTuber. He's the older guy, and then Calvin with the glasses over here. Calvin's going to be on our panel later this evening. He's got a crazy, awesome story. He came here 20 whatever years ago, and he's built a monster business just touching upon everything. One of them is called Layla. Check out Layla Bar and Workshop Coffee. That's probably the smallest of his businesses, though. And just before this offline, he was sharing he's never even heard of OV, but the connection resonates with him. What more kind of activities do you hope to create in Vietnam to get this community that you've built to draw in more people, hopefully in this room as well, to participate? What can they expect over the next 12 months?
Yeah, excellent question. So there's a lot of planning going on, and I'm very excited also to partner more with you and Vietcetera to establish the presence here. And what has been always the focus now within the last 12 months were offline meetups, because the pandemic situation allowed for us to meet in person again. So I was always very keen on getting that going. We are organized very independently, meaning that across the world, meetups are happening very independent of me. In many major cities, New York, London, Sydney, people organize meetups on their own. So I don't even interfere there. And I personally take charge of Singapore and yet now kind of Vietnam with you. What you can expect is, especially for us folks here in Ho Chi Minh, that we are much more present here frequently to host meetups. So I want to create an enduring cycle of people being able to connect with other overseas Vietnamese, create business opportunities for themselves. So offline meetups is a very big focus there. And then I think we talked about it. We could think about larger scale summit things, online meetups, because it's still an online community that is globally distributed, and many people are keen to connect with people across borders, right? So exploring that too, but I don't want to give away too much. Just expect a lot of activity within the next years for sure.
Cuong, I want to touch base on you're living in Singapore. You're not in Vietnam quite yet. You come here all the time. What was your decision behind going to Singapore first, and why not Vietnam? Maybe you can share about that decision.
Yeah, I think you've been there as well, right? So I was in Germany and was looking to go directly to Vietnam, because that has always been the end goal. I explored and I applied across, right? You got to be opportunistic in life, have to maximize your opportunities. Applied in Germany, applied in Vietnam. I had my offers lined up in Vietnam for some smaller funds and other opportunities. But then if you in the job search of LinkedIn, Vietnam positions open up in Singapore as well. And then I also saw a lot of opportunities that all the major tech players were actually having some Vietnam capability based out of Singapore. So that seemed very attractive to me, because also I just graduated. So one top of my priority would also be career growth, right? Making money, let's be honest. So these two things in Vietnam, not so easy to get. It exists. People like you who come here and do their own thing. But people like me who are maybe not as risk seeking like you, Singapore is a great bridge to do what I do. To take my own example, right? You go there, Singapore is super developed, gives you a lot of growth opportunity, gives you a proximity to Vietnam as well, because within my team, it's all Vietnamese. We speak all. There are days where I only speak Vietnamese with my clients, with my colleagues. So despite being in Singapore, I'm as Vietnamese as I've ever been. And it's a great place to start off and then make the final jump, because still Vietnam is not so easy as many think to start here from zero. So it's a good recommendation from my end, and it has been going well for me so far.
Cool. Yeah, I see. For people that don't have too much work experience, Vietnam is not the easiest. If you have managerial experience, as Robert Walters knows, I keep plugging them in because they're great. There's just so many opportunities. I mean, I see some in the audience here, like Valentin. He's the managing director of Andros Asia. I'm sure he got his gig because he's probably worked for a decade doing this kind of business for a while. But yeah, not an easy job, right? MD at Andros Asia, which is like a bunch of factories here and a global company. How do you find those opportunities, right? It's not exactly the easiest. Quang, of the 100 or whatever employees at Google working in Vietnam, and you're talking to them all the time, how many of them are thinking about coming home to Vietnam? I'm sure all of them, what's their sentiment? Are they thinking about it? What are some of their challenges for why they haven't made that move yet?
You mean my colleagues at Google, the
Yeah,
Vietnamese
yeah.
team? It's actually the other way around. Most of them are from Vietnam. So most of them moved to Singapore a couple of years ago, or moved to Singapore to finish university there or finish high school there and stayed there. So these are people from Vietnam. I'm actually one of two only Vitkios in my team. And it feels like within the team, not most of them are keen to go back.
They're not.
Yeah.
Why is
They're
that? What are their challenges for that?
Yeah. I think growing up in Vietnam, you have a different kind of, ambition towards your own country. You have more curiosity maybe outside. So that's what I'm hearing a lot. Many people enjoy the structuredness of Singapore. Also the stability in terms of job. Many people enjoy corporate life more, which is greater than in Vietnam, I would argue. So you have these kind of people. Then you have people who came and who specifically think about going back at some point. But then for Google specifically, it's also, you have golden handcuffs, we call it. It's a very comfortable position. You earn well, taxes low in Singapore. It's not as easy to leave it then again. So there are people like me who come and who are very determined to go. But then there are many people like me again, determined to go, but they never go.
I think we need to educate them.
Yes.
There's plenty of opportunities now in Vietnam.
Exactly.
If I didn't have Vietcetera, I'd be looking for a job here, I think. Cuong, we're kind of nearing the end of our fireside chat here with you here as well. I'd just like to close, one of the big factors, especially for overseas Vietnamese, when they consider moving here is their family and what their colleagues back home judge them for coming home to Vietnam for. Most of the perception's quite negative. What was your experience when you shared with your family or colleagues that you wanted to move to Asia, let alone Vietnam at some point? What was their reaction?
It's a good question. I think for me personally, it depends very much on family, right? My family moved to Germany and they're very keen to stay in Germany. So there are different kind of families, but many are still very linked to Vietnam, very connected to Vietnam. My parents are not like that. They came to stay in Germany, right? So the thinking when I shared with them that I wanted to move back was more like, hey, we came all the way here. Why would you want to go back, right? And they were worried, basically, because yes, they were visiting Vietnam every now and then, every 2 or 3 years, but they still had this prevalent sort of thinking about Vietnam being dangerous, being unordered, being not safe even. And they don't know how fast and how quickly it develops here, right? They don't have the insight that we have as locals here.
Yeah.
So when it then was Singapore and Google, they were all cool with it. But I think they wouldn't be so supportive, me going home and starting a company like you did. So,
Thank you guys. Thank you, Cuong, for joining today's fireside chat. It's been a pleasure learning about OV. Join the LinkedIn group.
Join the LinkedIn group and talk to me after the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cuong.